I'm Witt Siasoco. I'm an artist working with the Cornerstone Group, which is a development company, and Forecast Public Art on a project, year-long residency here in Richfield, Minnesota. I started this interview series as a way for me to find out a little bit more about working with community and art and community. And today we have Xavier Tavera, who's here, and I'll ask him some questions about working in that mode. But first, I wanted to give kind of a formal introduction to what RARE is. It's the Richfield Artist Resident Engagement. Is an artist residency initiative in partnership with the Cornerstone Group, a progressive real estate developer that solves community challenges through innovation and collaboration to increase access to art experiences. The residency is designed to cross boundaries and disciplines and invite Richfield residents to participate in building its more vibrant future. It's supported by an Arts Access Grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board and administered by Forecast Public Art. Xavier Tavera. After moving from Mexico City to the United States, Xavier Tavera learned what it felt like to be a part of a subculture, the immigrant community. Subjected to alienation has transformed the focus of his photographs to share the lives of those who are marginalized. Images have offered insight into the diversity of numerous communities and have given a voice to those who are often invisible. Tavera has shown his work extensively in the Twin Cities, nationally and internationally, including Chile, Uruguay, and China. His work is a part of the collections of the Minneapolis Institute of Art, Plains Art Museum, Minnesota Museum of American Art, Minnesota History Center, and the Weizmann Art Museum. He is a recipient of the McKnight Fellowship, Jerome Travel Award, State Arts Board, and Bronica Scholarship. Thanks for coming, Xavier. How are you doing today?
I'm great.
Good. I was reading a lot about your work. I've known you for a while, and we've worked together, and I've always had a huge admiration for the work that you do and the way that you use art as a tool to meet people. And I guess I just wanted to start it off with that, like talk about your process, because some articles that I've read, you've said like photography is magic, and it's an excuse to talk to people. So
Absolutely.
can you talk a little bit about how you approach your work and?
Well, I'm an introvert,
Mm-hmm.
and the camera has this thing to give me access to people.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go to anybody in the street and ask them, "Hey, how about what is your story? What do you do?" It'll be very awkward.
Mm-hmm.
But with the camera, out, I can have like a permission. They know what I want,
Mm-hmm.
and that will give me a door to go into people's lives and ask stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the main purpose of this is to try to understand,
Mm-hmm.
not to neither make assumptions or have anything solved, but try to understand why people do the things they do and behave the way they do.
I think I mean, we were talking about this earlier. It's like, for me, that's the problem that I have in working in this mode, is to really, I guess I have formulated opinions, I guess, as a photographer. You always take an objective, somewhat point of view, but that isn't entirely true, because the areas that you go are very charged with issues within the Latino community, right?
Right.
And so, you're selecting those in a way, right? Like, and how do
Oh,
you,
completely. Yeah.
like, how did you go about selecting Lake Street, or how did you go about the other projects that you've worked on? Like, there was the West Side veterans, like, so, yeah, how do you go about choosing, like, what you're gonna walk and what you're gonna shoot?
Well, I'm an immigrant, so this Latino community is something that I adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think I'm part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But since the beginning, 20 years ago, I was looking at it from an outsider perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one of my first projects was shooting cholos
Mm-hmm.
in the street,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to learn their codes, their colors, their behavior. How do they communicate to each other? How do they see everything else? How do they fit in a scheme in society?
Mm-hmm.
So I go there and start to ask questions, start to relate to them, and try to understand, because it's very easy to say bad kids, they're drugs, and they have this, or they have all that stuff, instead of, well, these kids have parents that work from 5 in the morning to 11 at night. They essentially don't have a family, and they are looking for somebody else to relate, so they will join these gangs to have another family. So I mean, is that wrong? Is that horrible? Probably not. These are human beings that are trying to fit and try to relate to each other, and so those are the issues that I'm interested in. Sorry. With the veterans is also very different, because I grew up in Mexico. The military is very repressive. So and my father was an activist, and we had that fear of the military. When I first got when the Republican Convention got here, I was the first one there marching for peace. So I have that relation with the military. But it's a challenge going there with these people that have fought for this country, and then start to ask them questions. And then finding out that 97% of them are completely against war. They like the discipline,
their backgrounds
they like the brothership,
too.
They're like, and all of a sudden that's surprising. So I mean, I'm there to learn, and I'm there to understand where are they coming from, why did they join, who drafted them, all that stuff. And usually I get out with even more questions than when I came into the project.
The tortured artist, right, that we were talking about.
Right, but that's okay, because my ignorance, limits me. So if I learn more, I'm going to have way more questions. So that's something that is interesting to me.
Yeah, I think I've fought with that. I mean, I'm going to continue on to make work, but it's always like, what do you learning from this? How do you continue on in the questions? And actually, I mean, it's also about the object, though, right? Like, so you have this beautiful interaction with the subject, but then it gets transferred into a gallery situation, right? And there's another audience there too. So, I mean, how do you bridge that gap between the genuine gesture that you're making in the street and then have this other interaction within this other gallery, And like, I mean, that necessarily isn't always your curation or your choice, but like, how's that experience too in showing?
Well, I'll be extremely arrogant if I come and say, I'm gonna educate people, and this, I don't even know, half of the time I don't even know. Yeah. But what's interesting in a museum gallery environment is that people will come to the pieces with all the information that they have personally. So they're gonna come and they're gonna see a huge size photo of a cholo, of a transvesti, of a military guy. And then they will come, and whatever they have, if the image is interesting, they're going to pour into that image. And that the image is going to talk to them. I'm not going to say, well, this person is called Juan Torres, and this is... No, it really doesn't matter. It matters if somebody has a fear of the Latino man. What's going to happen there? There's a confrontation there. There's a communication. So that is more interesting than me saying, this is it, and you shouldn't come out of it.
It's the mediated versus unmediated, right? Like discussion, or like the conversation. Like, I mean, I know that you've interjected yourself into some conversations, let people like look, and then they maybe approach you. I guess it isn't. It's not mostly probably not initiated by you, but there's the like, come and find out for yourself, or bring your own experience. The thing that is the artworks that are most powerful, right, are the ones that you come back to and you find something new every time, or you're like, you're trying to discover new things.
Right, and people are going to see, different things and we all do, when I see other work, is gonna talk to me in a certain way that probably the artist didn't intend it to. But that's all the information that I have, and I'm going to pour that into there, and
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because like I've been working with the Cornerstone Group, over this past year, and we talked a little bit about that earlier before the interview, but like, you've worked on Lake Street for over 2 decades, right? Like, and the arts have been a part of it, either like through your work, Wing's work. There's a lot of, people that have, had Lake Street as a subject matter. Like you know, how has it changed, and like has the art played a role in that? I mean, for me, I guess the question more is like what the role that is the arts like changing neighborhoods, and maybe not in a good or in a great way, like in what duty do we have to that, and is that play a factor in your what you choose? Does the arts play a role in bringing interest to an area and changing it like economically, like, and do we have a duty as artists to kind of look at that and try to work with the things that might come out of that, or
Well, more than transform is having those same questions that I have and then put them into a project. And that project can entice, you know, a conversation between the people who live around there. And this is not about, I'm not trying to beautify or anything like that. It's about, let's do a project so people can think, and if the project has something in it that can spark more questions or a dialogue, then that will be something that is interesting. So I've done different things, from projects that are directed exclusively for the Latino community. In Mercado Central, I put some Day of the Dead people with calaveras, and it stayed there for a month, and people had to leave and look at them and live with those pieces of art for some time. So what does that mean? Seeing themselves in a window. Another project trying to involve the local businesses.
yeah,
And how we don't shop locally, and if we were going to find an electrician, we go to the computer and find somebody somewhere else. And the surprises that are there, like, well, we have an electrician 2 blocks,
yeah,
and we have a sign painter,
yeah.
and we have a barber, and we have all this stuff. And since the community is diverse, it's also sometimes a little polarized, and we won't dare to go into these places. But then I'm saying, here is like any other place. You can walk in and see what is it about.
That was a fantastic project. I realized a part of the Pillsbury House art block.
Right.
Yeah, and it was a broadsheet, right? Like of like local business owners and their environment. That was incredible. I know sometimes too, as a part of your art block project, you did family portraits, right? Like, so sometimes you look at your work as a straight traditional photographer, like in a kind of like, not Sears portrait, but like, like, is that a part of your work too, as like a craftsperson, in a traditional role of photographer?
Well, photography is vast.
Yeah.
From selfies to very complicated digital stuff. So what I'm trying to do is speak a similar language for the audience that I have, and how are they going to interact with that language. So a family classical portrait is something that people will be willing to see, and people willing to have in their homes. So for this project, I photographed 16 to 20 different families, my neighbors.
Oh, okay. They were your neighbors.
They were.
Okay.
It was my block.
Okay.
And a couple people, from a couple other blocks.
I see.
So these are people that I see every day, but I've never haven't been into their houses prior to this project. And again, I'm an introvert, so I will get into my car or walk, and I will wave, be friendly, and keep on going. But this is the opportunity to go there, knock on the door, and say, this is what I'm going to do. I want to come here, make a portrait of your family in your home, and have that interaction. So I learned an enormous amount of things about all my neighbors. How are we so similar? And then at the end, to put it in a gallery, make everybody, all the block, go in the gallery and not only see themselves in the portraits, but see also the other neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting because actually they were looking at the pictures.
Yeah.
And they were pointing out, and they were going to the other one, and they were, oh, this is this guy, and this is that guy, and having interactions there amongst each other that we usually don't have, except probably for National Night Out, that a few of us come out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it comes, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
And it comes from a formal family portrait.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, they got to take that home.
Yeah.
They got to, get it from the wall and get it home. And I'm pretty sure more than half of them are hanging in their homes now.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
Yeah.
So I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's great. Your work is so personal, obviously. I just wonder if it's like, is it possible, like, for you to go to some place like Brooklyn or like, let's say, Des Moines, Iowa, or like, can you translate that same experience, or is it really about your immediate place? And have you done residencies where it's like, how do you transition into taking those things into spaces that aren't familiar?
So I'll give you a couple examples. The first one that it was completely out of my comfort zone was to photograph the Swedish community in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And I got invited to a men's retreat center that these gentlemen have, I think, every 3 months. I have invited to a formal dinner, and I get to taste herring and all that stuff, see their protocols, see how they interact with each other, how they accept a photographic project, a photographer being there, photographing their interactions. I went to their festivities, I went to their homes, and it was great. It was amazing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
So that inquisitiveness never leaves. It's always like, even if you're in a new place, of course you're going to be inquisitive and use those as a ways to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I got invited to go to Uruguay and do a project in a hospital. And the hospital had these images that were from a century ago, black and white, of all the doctors and surgeons, very solemn, And I said, okay, when I want to do the same thing, but I want to photograph everybody from the director to the worker, the people who are cleaning the floors, and they gave me access to everything, to the ER, to the morgue, to anesthesia, to doctors, directors, administrators, you name it. I was there 3 weeks photographing over 100 portraits.
Wow.
And it was incredible because it's another country we have in common, that we have the same language. And I have the access because I have a camera. And I can say, I'm here because of this, I have permission from the direction, I want to take your portrait. Same deal, I got an exhibition inside the hospital. And people were there, and people were excited to see themselves and to see their co-workers. And they were taking pictures with the pictures, and they were happy to be there, and they all of a sudden realized how important the team of cleaning people are for the hospital. Not only the surgeons and the doctors and the directors, but if that team doesn't work for one day, the whole of a hospital, doesn't function. And to realize that, like, wow, I'm important. I'm right beside in the same fashion that the director is, or that doctor here or doctor that. So to realize that is very important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the same thing that I'm trying to do here, like with the large portraits. It's funny, like the people that I've walked by, and because they see Tony, this is the man Tony, he works at the Pump and Munch, which is next door to my studio, and they walk by and they're like, hey, Tony, that's great. You're you're really big on this sign. Some people think that he's died though.
Right,
it's memorial.
That's so funny. Yeah, but I mean, why wait? Till people are dead.
Exactly.
Celebrate him live. We have that thing.
That's funny. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing the time. Actually, I mean, what are you working on now? And like, what are you trying to resolve? Or like, what questions do you have now that you're working on, like in new projects?
Well, I usually work like in 5 different things. When one falls down,
Yeah.
I don't feel lost because I
Uh-huh.
have 4. If
Yeah.
2, 3 fall down, I still have 2,
Yeah.
and don't feel like what am I gonna do next?
Yeah.
Um, One of them that is gonna be presented at the end of the summer is again with Pillsbury Theater.
Okay.
I'm gonna do another publication, but this time I am doing a lot of research about the history of South Minneapolis.
Okay.
And I'm grabbing everything, the good, the bad, the evil,
Mm-hmm.
the wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I'm researching about Ferris Alexander, that was the porn king,
Mm-hmm.
and had several bookstores and cinemas in the 70s and 80s.
Wow.
And he got shut down, and people were, fighting to get him out. He ended up in jail. He lost all his money. They demolished one of his theaters. Um, he's part of history. He's part of South Minneapolis. I mean, regardless of where you stand on looking at him and his life,
Mm-hmm.
he was part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm grabbing in the 4600 and Columbus. There's the Lee home,
Uh-huh.
the first African American family that moved to South Minneapolis, and they were sieged for a couple weeks, surrounded by people because nobody wanted an African American family to live in South Minneapolis.
Wow.
And this was in the 40s, 50s. It wasn't that long ago.
Wow.
So everything from the little island of Powderhorn is a man-made island that somebody
Oh,
made
really?
there. Right? Yeah,
Wow.
and it's incredible. So grabbing from all sides, putting all that in a publication, and then distributing that.
Wow.
So that people who live there, like me, that I didn't knew that story,
Mm-hmm.
to newcomers, immigrants, people from the suburbs, so they know this is part of what this community has been for the longest time.
Wow. That sounds fantastic. I can't wait to see it. Yeah, so that's at the end of the summer.
That's at the end of the summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for coming, Javier.
Next week.
I appreciate it.